Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 207th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And it's the penultimate chat of 2024. And I'm delighted to say that we have a guest, Dr. Vic Carr, is back with us. She was with us in April, but we enjoyed the chat so much we asked her to come back again. So, good morning, Vic.
Good morning, both of you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. Yeah, so how are you this morning, Vic?
I'm good. I'm recovering from COVID. I'm also recovering from the shock of being 50 this week. But other than that, pretty good. Looking forward to Christmas. I've put the Christmas trees up in school, all four of them, or five actually. So yeah, I'm good. I'm on the up.
Good, good. What about you, Stan? How are you this morning?
Well, talking Christmas trees, for the first time ever, I put lights and Christmas trees up on the last day of November. I have never done that in my life. A grandchild makes a big difference to Jill and I both spoke about the fact we didn't do Christmas until Christmas had finished in schools. We were both head teachers.
Mm.
And it's kind of you finished Christmas at school, then you went home and started Christmas at home.
Mm.
This is a whole month now. I can't believe.
We've switched that around this year. My children, even though they're adults now, become accustomed to our Christmas tree going up on my birthday weekend. But because I had COVID, I just didn't have it in me to get the decks out. So we're definitely a week late. They're slightly disappointed. They have said to me, just as a little check, that that doesn't mean that we're not having stockings this year, does it, Mum? I'm like, no, you might be 20 and 21, but goodness me, so there'll be stockings on Christmas Day.
I
Vic,
think what's
Vic,
lovely.
I stopped doing stockings last year for the first time, and Paul's 40.
I
I think
think I'd
what's
be
It's
lovely.
only
disowned.
because a grandchild came along, and I thought it's no time for the next generation to take that job on.
But I think that's the lovely thing about because we have five grandchildren now, and our children, their traditions, their Christmas tradition is based on our Christmas
Yeah.
tradition. So it's
Mm.
sort of like moving along a generation. So we go to their houses, and it feels exactly like our house used to feel like.
Yeah.
They're just reverting back to when they were children. They
How
haven't grown
wonderful.
up at all. They just want that Christmas experience to stay the same.
That's
Which is
lovely.
lovely. Yeah.
Well, the last story on that is when my children were both in their 30s. When it snowed on Christmas Eve, I ran with a pair of Wellingtons on backwards and jumped from the back door to land in the garden, so I looked like I'd made footprints coming into the house to assure them that Father Christmas had been.
Oh dear. Right. Okay. Well, it's been yeah, another busy week in education. So Stan, let's get to you. What's caught your eye? Again, I think it's the same issue, isn't
It's
it?
yeah, it's still this lack of clear vision as to where the new government is going with education. And I know that they do keep reminding us that they've got lots of things that need fixing that weren't done by the previous government. And I understand that, but I just liken it to fixing potholes in the road, but not making sure the road's going in the right direction anyway. So we're fixing things without really, it seems to me, having a clear picture of what's going to happen and what the vision for education is. And if you go back to the last Labour government, we had education, education, education as the theme, and there were clear views of what was going to happen and where it was going to go. And I just think this is really bitty stuff. This reset that we've just had, so it talks about early years, talks about SEN, but it's under the is it opportunity mission that education falls under? And opportunity to me means chance. And I don't want a chance education policy. I want some certainty about what's going to happen to children. And I'm all for, you know me, I'm all for early years support and improving. But it just feels as though it's not part of an overall vision of where we need to go. And as you and I were talking about the other day, something joint across government to say, actually, we're going to have a 10 or 15-year plan for education, and this is where we're going to take it. And, all sides of the house can agree on the major parts of it. And let's do something. that takes us into the future with some certainty.
Mm.
Right. I'll come off my soapbox now.
I strongly agree, though. I strongly agree. I think I read an audio, well, I listened to an audiobook recently by a chap called Sam Friedman called The Failed State. It was absolute genius. The book was so accessible to everybody. It wasn't
Yeah,
kind
it's
of,
written in a very straightforward manner.
yeah, very
It's like a
straightforward, very,
conversation.
very, yeah. Have you read it as well,
I
Frank?
have, yeah,
A
yeah.
very complex political ideology made accessible to everybody, explained, illustrated by everyday things that we all have to experience. And I think he talks about this short-termism and this fact that education is one of a handful of political footballs that get kicked around with various different parties about how we're going to fix this, that, and the other. And the problem is, it is very short term. And I think I thought this about COVID actually when that all happened. If everybody had put to one side their bickering and their kind of posturing and what have you, and just said, right, let's get together and fix this, we may have been in a better situation. I kind of feel the same about education. It just needs to be put to one side from kind of belonging to a political party and made more long term with a very clear direction. And I just to slightly disagree with Stan ever so slightly about early years. I actually think early years is important. And I think the
Oh,
state of our society means that we have to invest in that because of other things going wrong. But I don't think it's the be all and the end all. And I think nor is Breakfast Club the be all and the end all, but these become political sound bites. And I think in Sam's book, he talked about this every Monday morning, they have to have this little soundbite ready. He had an expression for it, but I don't know if it's I don't know if I'm allowed to say it online. But anyway, he had an expression for it, and it feels like that might just be that political soundbite of the week. But I couldn't agree more with you. I think a long-term apolitical direction of travel that we all buy into, that we all know is going to continue and have longevity, and people can have a look at that. But I think inclusivity as well, and not just it being about one element of education, because I think higher education colleagues might think, well, nothing's happening for us. ITT, nothing, that's been absolutely shambolic what's happened to them over the last few years. University, so I think clear, a cohesive structure, and it's going to take the current government time to do it. I get that. And when you uncover a whole mess, which they obviously have, it's going to take a little while. But I think including voices from all stakeholders and all sectors might really help inform before you start making decisions. And I had it here where I was kind of, people were putting me under pressure, rightly so, to say, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I said, I'm doing nothing because I'm finding out. I am finding out what I need to know. And I had to hold the line because I was being told, just do this. And I thought, I'm not just going to do anything that I then have to undo. I need to know. I had to uncover every rock, lift every stone, and what have you. And that helped me in the long run to make authentic, long-reaching
So really,
decisions.
in a way, Vic, I think I've heard you say about inspection. It would have been helpful to have a sort of moratorium, just stop them. But in a
Yeah,
way,
just
would it have
pause,
been
just press
easier for the
pause.
government to simply say, yeah, we're in listening mode at the moment. We're
Mhm.
not going to make any major announcements on it, and actually engage the profession to try and get to that position where Stan was talking about
Mhm.
all parties coming together. It may not be that political parties are happy to come together, but if you could get the vast majority of senior leaders,
Mm.
governors on your side, then that's a good position to argue,
Mm.
from. So is that really what you're advocating?
Yeah, I am actually. I think there's a lot that could be paused, and I think this last 12 months, I'm not Ofsted bashing in any way. Don't press the buzzer, Stan. But the last 12 months has shown us that there's so much toxicity surrounding the inspection system that perhaps it does need a pause and a reset. We've got a new government who could press pause and say, let's look at everything. Let's just look at everything. I mean, the opportunity to do that, if I'm brutally honest, was during COVID, when literally everything stopped, but the focus was on rightly on other things. But resuming things and making it all about, SATs and standards and Ofsted immediately afterwards was probably a mistake. And I think a lot of people knew that at the time. So this isn't me sort of looking back with rose-tinted glasses. the world still spun when we didn't have SAT tests. The world still spun when Ofsted couldn't inspect schools. So it would have been possible to just press pause on that, as it would be now, to say, let's understand more about education from birth all the way through to higher education. Let's understand this pathway that our young people have to navigate, and what that entails from all different walks of life. Because we talk about disadvantage, but throwing a few £100 per child classed as disadvantaged is not really, and it hasn't had an impact. So why are we still perpetuating this idea that people premium is the thing? It hasn't worked. You only have to look that it hasn't worked. So let's have a look at what could work. Let's have a look at something else. Let's press pause and just see what's in the art of the possible, I think.
It's funny, I spoke
Back to what we saying last week about it's inspecting the community rather than individual schools and hospitals and everything, and say, let's have a look at what it's like to live here, and let's have a look at what it's like to live here if you're not wealthy, if you're middle income, if you are wealthy, and what's the differences, and why are those differences when you live in basically in the same community.
Yeah.
So what can be done about that? And I think I said last week, imagine if you put a judgment on your school based on say social distress in the area. If your school couldn't be at the top grade until your school was in the area around your school had less social disruption, then maybe schools, maybe doctors' surgeries, maybe hospitals, maybe the police would get together to say, we need to solve this for all our sakes.
But also it would highlight the fact that schools don't work in isolation. We're judged in isolation. We are, and that's the whole point. Ofsted will judge you in isolation. They talk about understanding the context of your school. That's really tricky for anybody in a couple of days. But I think we are judged in isolation, and yet we are contributed to or taken from in a number of ways. As you say, depending on your postcode, your GP surgery might be great or might not be. Depending on your postcode, you might have access to bus routes, to libraries, to the beach, to art, whatever. But also, depending on your postcode, your family might be able to afford to live in a house there, which may not be a desirable area, but it's an affordable one. And I think with the cost of living being what it is, affordable housing does have a huge influence on what goes on, and also on parental intervention with children. So it's complex, isn't it? If you've got money, you can go on holiday. If you've got a little bit of money, then you go on holiday during the term time because it's cheaper, which affects your child's attendance. And you're also then fined, or you lie to your school, breaking down the relationship, and so on and so on.
Business like a newsagent's, that you have to in a seaside town, you cannot afford to be closed during the half-term holidays or during the summer holidays.
So that naturally then affects everything.
Your school holiday. When do you take your family holiday?
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that this should be carte blanche, that everybody, but we need to be more, I think, responsive to the family and the demands on those families. It was interesting. I had a chat. I think I mentioned this before, but a few weeks ago I had a chat with Gina Cicerone, who is the CEO of the Fair Education Alliance. She'd spent she'd gone to Canada, Australia, and I think it was New Zealand, to look at how they're tackling similar sorts of issues, and some interesting work coming through, which suggesting that of course early years is important in terms of getting that right, but actually the most telling element is adult education. Actually this is something which politicians are very keen to ignore because it's a vote loser. But actually at the end of the day, she was saying, we haven't really focused sufficiently on educating adults. It's all around skills, adult skills to get a job. But in many respects, this is a much broader understanding about what education is for adult life. And that's where the focus has been. Some interesting projects going on in these countries, which are actually showing some positive impact for relatively little investment. So I think that's an area that I think the government would be wise to sort of consider giving more focus to that.
I think Labour's a good, best place to do it in terms of, if you think that traditional ideology is about social growth and what have you, rather than just capital gain. And I'm not putting a divide between Conservatives and Labour voters, because I actually struggle to vote for anybody with any real value anymore. But I think if your whole purpose is around social development and growth, then perhaps you are best placed to say, well, why are we only focused on skills for capitalism? Why are we not focused on social skills and family skills? Because what you said earlier about your children wanting to replicate their childhood, they obviously had a very safe, very loving, stable childhood, and they want to perpetuate that for their children, and that's wonderful. Naturally, then the indicators would be that your grandchildren would grow up in those homes and have stable lives and contribute well to society, but not everyone has that benefit. And that's why I think early education is important, because what I'm finding, and I could be completely wrong, is that we all argue about children learning to read and write at a very, very early age, but we're not talking about, are they loved? Do they feel safe? Are they coming to school able to interact? Because they're not taught those skills at home. They feel perhaps unsafe, ignored. I see so many people now pushing push chairs, texting people on their mobile phone. How they don't walk into a lamppost is beyond me. But when I had children, and I'm not saying I'm the perfect mum, I looked at my kids because I didn't have a phone, because I was of a generation where we didn't have mobile phones. So we looked at our kids and Googled at them and laughed with them and pointed things out. And nowadays, the interface between children and their parent is this: it's the back of the parent's hand while they're texting or chatting or watching something. And so is it any surprise that speech and language is an issue in early age children? I don't think it is, because are they spoken to?
Yeah.
I sat in the hospital the other day for a checkup, and there were a couple of grandparents, and I could hear this music, and the child was in the pushchair, and the music was coming very, very loudly. I thought it was on the TV. I was thinking, there's no TV on, but she had a device, and the music was Old MacDonald. We used to sing that to our children. This child was like this, looking at a device at a couple of years old with their grandparent. And I think that human interaction is being lost. And I'm not bashing social media or devices. I think technology is a wonderful thing, but I think there are things that it brings and there are things that it absolutely removes from the quality of our lives. So I think the early years agenda for me is about human interaction and warmth and learning how to be a good human being. And I think that speaks to your skills idea of how do we adult. I coach my kids. My kids are 20 and 21. They know that this weekend they're going to have a coaching chat about finances, not because they can't manage their finances, because I periodically want to have a chat with them about various aspects of adult life that nobody chatted me through. I just kind of scrabbled my way through it. So if I can enable my children to have those adult skills, but through conversation and understanding, all the better for it. So not everyone has that. How do
No.
we fix that? I don't know. We're fixing holes holes in people's growth and education that weren't there, perhaps from their wider family circle. But that's contributed by our society, isn't it? And our changes in the way we work.
Yeah.
And that goes back to it's about the leadership of these people. You know, it's I think, just going back to what we were saying about the government, this would have been an ideal point to have said, right, we've been in government 6 months, we've listened, we've learned, we've found out what the issues are, and now we're going to set what we're going to do. Not we've set what we're going to do before we came in. We then produce a lot of things that look like excuses, and then we have this reset that doesn't really reset anything, just re-emphasizes and puts some milestones in. I can't imagine a school or a new head teacher going into a school and working like that. This is what I'm going to do before I get there. I'm doing it anyway. I'm now going to complain about the previous leadership of the school for the first 6 months, and then try to reset what I'm going to do. And I think Vic said before, listening to what's going on for the first few months in a new role is really important before you make decisions about what needs to change and what is going to change.
It's so tricky.
Go on.
It is tricky.
Well, I was going to say that just an example of this is going to be played out next week, in that the government, I think, rightly decided that the previous government were wrong in sort of completely wanting to ditch BTECs. And so they decided that they were going to extend BTECs, or there was going to be a window where that they weren't going to close down. But actually what happened was they weren't clear they hadn't thought through that. To them, this feels like, oh well, this is something that's going to happen next summer. But of course, colleges, further education colleges, they're doing their open evenings in
Yes. Yeah.
September, October.
Yeah.
So they needed certainty about, is this BTEC course actually going to run
Yeah.
next year? And to me, that's where this lack of lack of clarity about, these decisions on their own look great, but actually it feels as though no one close enough to power has actually got that practical understanding about the implications of that decision.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important, I think, to go out and just take a bit of time to speak to sector representatives, and not just from your favorites or your buddies or, your mate's school, but go out and talk to contentious people, people who are going to challenge your thinking. Go and talk to difficult people and let them tell you the pitfalls that you might reach if you don't consider these things. You don't have to do anything about it, but at least you're informed. And I think you've just hit the nail on the head. It's a great idea, but without, it's great when civil servants come up with these wonderful ideas, but they're not actually doing the job. They don't understand the cycle of the year, the routine of the school, the rhythm that, in the military, it'd be called a battle rhythm. You have to seek the opportunity at the right time to make those changes so that they don't have negative ripples and impact on other parts of the working day, the working life, whatever. And I just think they haven't gone out and found the information, and it would be very easy to do.
Yeah, so I
work with doing some work. I won't say where, because a civil servant, we needed some results, some SAT results, and he wanted the meeting to be in May. And I said, well, we won't have the results then. Well, can't we get them by then? The question. What, before they've done the tests?
Another thing that's hit me this week in the news, I don't know if you've seen it, and again, I'm a bit more skeptical these days, having listened to Sam Friedman's book, but this whole idea of chopping the funding for the cadet forces, I think that's such a fatal error, yet again, a fatal error of investment into the youth. The volunteer sector that invests into cadet organizations or any kind of uniformed organizations, really, they should be championed. They certainly shouldn't be stripped of cash or support. I mean, I cannot stress enough the impact of being in the cadets on me as a teenager. I did not have a good start in life. I mean, I was thinking, what struck me this week, on Monday, my birthday, a podcast came out that I'd recorded for Women Empowering Defence, and it was about domestic violence and the impact of that on your life. It was so hard for me to do. And so many people have reached out to me and said, flipping heck, that was a tough listen, but haven't you done well? And I think one of the things I say in there, and I've said it in my leadership book as well, is that organizations that help young people to see that there is a different world, a world outside of their home, a different way of living, should be championed, because be that Duke of Edinburgh, cadets, scouts, whatever, you're taking people away from their home and you're giving them a community, a family away from their normal family, which might not be a healthy family, and you're showing them those skills that we talked about earlier about human interaction and warmth, and to help them be sensible, functioning adults when they move out into the world. So I think anybody who's cutting those services needs a real think. Youth clubs went by the wayside, and then we have an increase in crime. It's not rocket science. It really isn't.
No. Tom, when you said the Duke of Edinburgh, have you seen the junior Duke process?
Yeah.
That's where I'm a governor. The school take part in it, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is.
Because it's all about the family getting involved in doing the act. So children have to do various activities in order to progress, but they do it with the family. Things like mending a puncture on a bike and things like that. And the popularity, it's oversubscribed in the school. We've only got so many places because there's only so many staff we can put to it. But it's fantastic. If I could be an advocate for that, I would definitely say, have a look at it for your school, because it's well worth putting into place.
Do you think that parental engagement piece is an interesting one? So I think I said earlier, we're judged in isolation schools, aren't we? No one says, about the parents being involved. I mean, I love my school, but even here, I'm starting to think, what else can we do to engage parents? What innovative ways can we engage them? Because, we ran a phonics education evening. We do it every year. This year we had 6 parents that came.
Mm.
They're like, we're in a 2.5 elementary school,
That's awful,
6.
isn't
And I think either they just have great faith in us, or they're not bothered. I like to think it's the first one. But
it?
equally, wouldn't it be nice? Well, in terms of engagement, that's a very simple thing. And yet, we had a bonfire night here, and we had hundreds of people. We had thousands actually. We had 2,500 people that came in our community. It was a community bonfire event. It was a great success. But so people will come to that, but not.
Yeah, it's a social.
Um,
This gets back to really that Gina Cicerone bit about adult education.
mm,
Adult education. There is the element of social interaction, which is important. But I think what she was saying was that for some of the most vulnerable young people, some of those who are academically challenged by
mm,
by schooling, actually some of it can be, in her view, sort of pushed back to their upbringing and
yeah,
and the fact that they weren't read to because the parents couldn't read themselves, and
yeah,
these sorts of things are playing out, and schools are struggling, to tackle some of that. And of course, that's the point that's not politically easy to get across. Vote for us because actually you're not a great, you can't read, therefore we're going to help you read. It's not
yeah.
really the easiest thing for some of those parents to actually sort of accept.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm going to move us on because we've already done about 35 minutes. So Vic, I think we talked about the point you were going to raise about just your expectations around the current government. I think you've probably covered a little bit of that already. I don't know if
Mm.
there's any more you want to say, but
No, I just think it's acknowledgement that I don't think they're necessarily making excuses about having a lot of things to fix. I think it's very obvious to most sensible people that the country was in a bad way. So they do have a lot to fix. But I think just holding the line and taking a deep breath, because we know nothing will be fixed overnight. That'd be foolish to expect it. But just taking a breath and reaching out and finding out information would be a real bonus for them, I think. And I'm not sure I've seen so much of that. The bits and pieces I have seen around Send, great. I like that. I like it that we're looking at those vulnerable kids. I think that's a whole big picture and involves the NHS as well. But yeah, I think for me, it's about just holding the line and not making any rushed. Again, in the military, it's called taking a condor moment.
yeah,
People, when you're trained, they tell you to just take, even if, there's all kinds going on and,
Mm.
bangs and noises, just take a minute to think, just think it through
yeah.
because,
Somebody said to me, time spent on reconnaissance is never wasted.
yeah, absolutely that, 100% that.
Mm.
And that's what I think might be a bit missing. But it's not irrecoverable. It's not something that you can say, oh, well, the time's passed. People could do it now. You could literally have that bold moment and say, look, we're pressing pause. We need more information before we make long-term, long-reaching, big, impactful changes.
Yeah,
It's
The
possible.
psychologist I work with used to say in a crisis, count to 6, think slow and act slow.
Mm,
And that's when we're doing like critical incident in school, a fire or something. Just take 6 seconds to get your brain thinking slowly,
mm,
thinking deeply, if you like, rather than panic. And I think, much more than 6 seconds maybe, but we do need a chance to look back and
mm,
say, where are we actually going with this?
mhm.
Not let's just fix everything that we know is wrong. What's the outcome? What
Yeah.
for?
It'd be
well,
good to have a think tank, wouldn't it? I wonder if that would ever happen.
well, I think it's
Well,
needed.
the danger if it doesn't is you end up like America, where a president is saying we're going to do this in schools and we're going to do that in schools, and and how frightening is that?
That's terrifying, isn't it?
Right. Well, what's caught my eye is that this week was the Ofsted annual report, something I used to be heavily involved in up to 2012. Amazingly, Ofsted's managed to get that down to 52 pages. So this is not just about education, folks. This is about social care. It's about education in prisons, all this sort of stuff. 52 pages. That's
Do
how.
Ofsted inspect social care?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, so but it's amazing, and a colleague, Adrian Gray, who's been a guest on here before, we were both senior HMIs, quite well above senior, but very senior, and we were both responsible for writing chunks of the annual report. And Adrian has a really sort of excellent LinkedIn page, and he's written about this week. So I'm going to read what Adrian wrote because it's quite short, which avoids Stan using the buzzer because it's not me talking, it's actually Adrian. So what Adrian said was, why did Ofsted bother? When I looked at Ofsted's annual report, I thought I was missing something, as it did not seem to be there. Then I realised, no, this is the total lot. Given that the duty of the Chief Inspector is to provide insight into the quality of the nation's education, this is really a memo from Ofsted that is not providing value for money. Even most of the data used in the commentary was provided by the DfE and adds nothing that we did not already know. Compare this report to those from a few years ago, and the decline is stark. Is no one at Ofsted capable of seeing this? I will give a mark to the poor soul who entitles one section Childcare Deserts and Oases, which at least showed some imagination. Otherwise, we have sentences such as children reach school age and then progress through education, their background continues to shape their experiences. Well, strike me down with a feather, as Blackadder would have said. What makes me a bit angry is that I'm now a strong believer in the insights from inspection helping improvement. This almost seems like it's presenting a case for the opposite. As one of my contacts said, there does not seem to be any evidence at all from inspection. So, must try harder. Is that purple or red in the new inspection palette? So I think the point Adrian's making, which I think is entirely valid, is, if Ofsted was really uncovering stuff, was doing proper inspections, it would then actually identify some of the key issues which the Gilbert Learning Review post Caversham highlighted, which were around funding, some of the issues around social media, teacher recruitment and retention, all of these issues. She had 6 issues. All of these are key issues which are actually at play, given very little attention. You can't give the attention of 52 pages, to cover the broad range of work that Ofsted's doing. So all of these inspections have been boiled down. Everything that Ofsted's done into 52 pages really is not worth the effort. And the only reason why Ofsted exists is in order to produce an annual report to Parliament. This is the report that's indicating the state of English education and children's services now. But actually, it's a pretty paltry effort, to be honest, and will make no contribution whatsoever to the future, progress and development of children's services in this country, if that's the best we can do. So that's 35 minutes, folks.
Is our time up? Have we ended on Ofsted?
Well, yeah, unless you want to sort of, well, perhaps we ought to end up with a more positive note than that. I'm struggling to think of one at the moment off the top of my head. Anybody got any?
I feel like it can't get any worse. So ergo, it can only get better. It can only get better in the new year, surely.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should play it out with the song, things can only get better.
I think, though, earlier, before we were recording, I think you were right, though, Vic. You made the case that, there was a lot, this government had a lot to deal with, and actually, I've said, I put on record that I do feel, more optimistic. There's some sense of disappointment. It's not happening quite as quickly as I think we would have liked, or there wasn't sort of time for us to sort of just corral everything together and get people together and to sort of have a clear vision of where we're going. But actually, from where we were before July election to where we are now, at least I feel as though we might have more people listening. Whether they're willing to learn from some of the errors that we all make. That's a clear indicator. For me, it will be a clear indication of whether or not 5 years from now we're going to end up with a better service, and perhaps they're hoping they would be re-elected again, but who knows what will happen over that. But at least 5 years from now, I certainly hope we're going to be in a better position than we are at the moment.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, part of you has to have faith, otherwise your life's work suddenly becomes meaningless, doesn't it? And it's interesting. I must, after school today, drop in a copy of my latest book to a chap who lost his wife last year. So the book's dedicated to two colleague head teachers who I know. And perhaps I was thinking on the way to school today, perhaps I should have dedicated it to Ruth, but I didn't know Ruth. So that's what makes it a little bit, inappropriate. But I knew two head teachers who died last year. And they're amazing. And one died suddenly and unexpectedly, and it was dreadful. And one sadly died of cancer, both far too young in their early 40s. And the book's dedicated to them really because like me, like you guys, we've made education our life's work. We're passionate about it. And I don't think anybody really comes to work looking to do a bad job. We try and make the best job we can in the world that we live at that time. And the landscape changes, so you can't really compare how we did things 5 years ago because the expectation is different now. So I just think as long as we can all come to school knowing we've done the best we can on that day for our team, for our children. I often ask myself, what have I done for the team today? Be that my family team or my school team. And I feel like that's perhaps the small bit of positivity we can add to our daily lives. And the slightly higher picture, the government picture, the agenda for academies or maintained or whatever, I think hopefully we're getting more traction now. Certainly, when I took over this school, we had so much to do that I couldn't have made quick decisions effectively. And I had to take my time to try and find out some stuff. And maybe that's what's going on in the background. I don't know. It's difficult to kind of judge what goes on in Whitehall, isn't it? But hopefully we're on the right path. Whether there's potholes in the road or not, Stan, let's hope we're on the right road. Fingers crossed. And we can always turn around and we can always take a different route. And I think that would be the secret for Bridget. If she stays on the route regardless, that would be a mistake. If she looks on the route now, because where else can we go? We have to put one foot in front of the other, and something comes up, or she has an insight or an epiphany, then hopefully she'll be brave and say, right, listen, we need to stop, turn around, turn right, left, whatever, because this is a better route for us all. That's what I hope. And I've got faith because hope dies last, right?
Yeah. And on that we have ended on a positive note, so that's great. And thank you, Vic, so much for your time this morning, and for also the people that watch and listen to our podcast. Thank you for doing that. And next week we have Eric Craven, the Scouse poet, back for our pre-Christmas highly popular edition. Yeah, and that'll bring a close to 2024 Frankenstein chat. So
look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you very much, and yeah, we'll see you all being well next week. So cheerio, everyone. Bye bye.